Common knowledge tells us that a mother's well being impacts her kids, but a new study shows a body keeps score even across generations. The latest research shows adversity experienced by women, even in her own childhood, shows up in the health of her offspring.
Joining us to explain is UCLA developmental psychology professor Dr. Bridget Callaghan. Thank you so much for being with us. So you are behind a new study that has come out dealing with this very issue. What is sort of the headline, major takeaway from the study?
Yeah, sure. So the major headline is basically that these experiences that mothers had in their childhood seem to have an impact on their children's microbiome. So these bacteria that live in the body and that are associated with people's health and well-being when children are 2 years old. So even these intergenerational effects can be seen at the level of the microbiome.
Well, let's talk about that for people who aren't familiar with microbiome. What is that, and what are the changes in the body found in children's studies?
Yeah. So the microbiome really just refers to this big mass of bugs, bacteria that live in and on our bodies. And we're particularly interested in those that live in our gut, in our gastrointestinal tract, because those seem to be most related to health and well-being, kind of broadly speaking, as well as to mental health. It's even shown that some of these bugs can influence the brain, so they can talk to the brain and produce things that the brain uses. So it's a pretty cool system.
So that is why the system is important. How are you finding that the system is impacted by the mother's experiences, and what experiences are we talking about for the mother? What type of adversity?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to know that this is not, a tough day at work. These are really significant, tough experiences that mums have gone through in their childhood. So things like trauma and stress and abuse. And we're seeing that when mum has experienced high levels of those things in childhood, their 2-year-old children's microbiome, so these bugs that are in the gut, seem to be different. We also see that mum's anxiety during pregnancy is associated with the kids' bugs in the gut, and as well as things that have happened to the child from their own birth to when they're 2 years old.
Why do you think this study is significant?
I think the most significant thing here is that we're seeing, that an event several decades earlier impacts the biology of children when they're 2 years old. And the fact that we're seeing that at the microbiome is really important, because we know that we can intervene at the level of the microbiome. So we could give probiotics, antibiotics, prebiotics, all different ways to change the microbiota that could potentially help with some of the negative consequences of these types of experiences.
What are the negative consequences? What you're saying that the microbiome in the gut is different, but what does that cause for these children?
So in this particular study, we don't have any causal associations. It's important to note, but there's lots of evidence in rodent models, as well as in rats and mice, as well as in monkey models, and some in humans, showing that the composition, so the number of microbes in the gut, what sort of microbes they are, this is really important for an individual's mental health, and there does seem to be causal associations.
Well, you mentioned mental health. Let's talk about that. There's a connection with the brain and the gut. Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the gut microbiome, so these bugs that are in the gut, they can talk to the brain and they can influence brain function. So they can produce chemicals that the brain uses. They can signal to the brain via, the vagus nerve, so this big nerve that runs across our whole body. And there are just a variety of different ways, even the immune system, via which the microbes can talk to the brain.
So what's your recommendation to parents who maybe are concerned that, a mother that's had a lot of trauma and is hearing this and wondering if there's anything that they should do for their children?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is not, a causal study, but this is one, step in this line of research where ultimately, hopefully, we'll be able to make very specific recommendations of maybe the types of diet that you should follow after these experiences, or the types of probiotics or prebiotics that you could use to help your gut recover from these experiences.
But if you look at the history of time, right, and you have African Americans in this country who have had compounded trauma for over 400 years, it gets passed down and passed down and passed down. It then leads to a physical. I mean, can you look at that and say something that happened years ago is still having an effect on my body and my children's health today?
Yeah, I think you can, and there's lots of evidence to show that that's true. Certainly the microbiome is not going to be a magic bullet to fix, those types of patterns. I'm not trying to say that at all. But it's probably one piece of a pretty complex puzzle. And so when we look after our health in all sorts of domains, including our gastrointestinal health as well as our mental health, hopefully we can start to undo some of those really challenging patterns of adversity across generations.
Yeah.
Doctor, thank you so much for being on with us. For more on the work being done at UCLA, visit their Brain and Body Lab online at brainandbodylab.psych.ucla.edu. Thanks so much for being on.
Very informative. We do appreciate it. Now, still ahead, one of our very own KTLA makeup artists helping raise money for striking actors in need. Doug will have details in our entertainment report.
I love that. All right, and later we're getting our giggle on. Our new series, Summer of Funny, kicks off this morning with rising star comics doing live sets, all for your votes. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back.
I'm always the first one out. I'm always up for a challenge.